He never knew the exact flavor of that cake. He ate it absent-mindedly, between a text message on his cell phone and a sip of cold coffee. She, however, made a point of making it every year, on the same day, the same way, even though she knew he would barely thank her. It was his favorite, even though he had never said it out loud. That year, for the first time, the smell did not come from the kitchen. The house was silent, without the sound of the pans being removed from the oven, without the sugar and affection icing spread on the table. It was in that emptiness, in the missing taste of what he always had and never valued, that regret took up residence. Because only when we no longer smell it do we realize who spread it out of love. That birthday morning, he went downstairs expecting the routine he had never paid attention to, but there was no pot on the stove, no cake cooling on the iron rack. For the first time in many years, he realized that he didn't know how to make his own coffee. And when he opened the cupboard where she kept the recipes, the ones she never wanted to show anyone, he found, among yellowed papers, a single sentence written in shaky handwriting. "As long as he has the cake, he'll have a piece of me too." That's when everything started to come back like a whirlwind. The memories, the ignored gestures, the words she swallowed out of love. And then, in that same moment when the oven remained cold, his heart began to burn. If this story has already caught your attention in the first few seconds, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It makes all the difference in helping more people find stories like this. On the morning of her birthday, Adam walked downstairs, ignoring the silence. The wooden floor, which always creaked under her footsteps, remained silent. The kitchen, which used to smell warmly of vanilla and nutmeg, was cold and sterile, as if no one lived there. He ran a hand through his hair, half irritated, half confused. His phone was already vibrating with congratulatory messages, but none of them really mattered. What did matter, he didn't know yet. He just felt an uncomfortable absence, as if something essential had been ripped from the air. He opened the refrigerator on reflex, expecting to see the cake. That cake, light brown with slightly melted sugar icing, lemon zest on top, on a white platter with faded flowers on the edges. But there was only silence. Not a trace of batter, not the noise of the mixer that he hated hearing so much on other days of the year. It was at that exact moment that a strange taste filled his mouth. It wasn't physical. It was the taste of loss, of absence, of regret. Still nameless, still formless, but already lodged deep inside. He sat at the table as he had since he was a boy, the same place he always had. Everything was around him. Mahogany chairs, the same crocheted tablecloth, the same pots with red lids. Everything, except her. He didn't hear the hoarse voice calling, "Boy, wash your hands." Nor did he see the small shadow arranging the cutlery with almost religious precision, only the dry sound of the clock on the wall. The hands seemed to mock the wasted time, the birthdays that had passed without even a thank you. And he realized that for so many years he had had the luxury of ignoring her. She had always been there, invisible, present, faithful, but never eternal. In the recipe drawer, which he opened on impulse, he found a worn sheet of paper, folded. In for. It was in her handwriting. He would recognize that curved R anywhere. The sentence was simple but cutting. "As long as he has the cake, he will have a piece of me too." He leaned back in his chair, as if he had been struck. Because there, in that sentence written without the intention of being read in life, was all the love he had not known how to see. The cake she made every year was more than just a dessert. It was a silent reminder that someone still cared. And now, on the first birthday, without smell, without taste, without her, everything made sense. But it was too late. And the cake, for the first time, was not on the table, nor in the oven, nor anywhere. It was inside the longing and the regret that was beginning to take shape. He met Clara when he was still too young to understand what absence was. His mother hired her after his father's third bout of allergies, which required an immaculately clean house. Clara arrived in her early 40s, with her hair tied in a simple bun, modest clothes, and a presence so light that it seemed like she didn't take up any space. But she did. She filled the gaps between the couple's fights, the uncomfortable silences at dinner, the shoes thrown in the hallway, and the glasses forgotten on the balcony. Clara was like a warm breeze that entered through the cracks of pain, without making a fuss, without asking permission. She called him Little Adam at first. He thought it was funny, but he didn't like it. He ran away from her, he teased her. He insisted on leaving a mess in what she had just tidied up. And still she smiled, and she put his favorite dish hidden in the back of the fridge, along with a note, "To Little Adam, with love." She was the one who taught him how to tie his shoelaces, who took his drawing to stick on the refrigerator door, who covered him in the early hours of the morning when he forgot the blanket on the floor. His mother saw it, but didn't comment. His father didn't see it, and that was enough to keep Clara invisible. When his mother died, a quick, silent death from a sleeping aneurysm, it was Clara who wore mourning first. She didn't wear black, but her eyes held a deep weariness and a pain that wasn't just hers. Adam, then 16, locked himself in his room for 2 days, and it was Clara who left food on his doorstep, who turned off the hallway light so he could sleep, who wrote on a sheet of notebook paper, "She loved you more than anything, and I'm still here if you want to. Be here too." He didn't answer, but he ate it all. And on the 3rd day he came out of the room and saw her cleaning out her mother's closet with almost ceremonial care. He didn't know it, but that day she decided she would stay, that she wouldn't let that boy grow up alone. They never talked about it. There was no renewed contract, no raises, no promises. She simply stayed. She started taking care of the house as if it were hers, and little by little she also took care of his loneliness. She knew he wasn't easy. She saw him become an arrogant, closed-off man, addicted to winning, and even so, on the next birthday, she made the cake. Not for the cake, but for him. Adam grew up. He went to college. He dated women who thought the lady of the house was funny. One of them even asked, "Does she still live there?" as if Clara were an outdated object. He laughed out of embarrassment, and she, Clara, heard. She didn't complain. She just started making the cake earlier so that it would be ready before the guests, so that no one would see, so that they wouldn't make fun of her. It was her way of continuing to take care of her, in secret. Years passed. Dad died in a nursing home. Adam took over the family business. He changed cars several times, and his girlfriends too. But Clara never left that house. She continued to sleep in the back room, drink tea at 6 in the evening, and organize the bills before he even asked her to. She was a constant presence, but almost imperceptible. Except for the cake. That yes was impossible to ignore, even if he pretended otherwise. The strangest thing is that she never asked anything. She never wanted to know about his plans, meetings, or achievements. She just wanted to know if he would eat a piece while it was still warm, or if he would rather wait for it to cool down. He almost never answered, but she did it anyway, as if her fidelity didn't depend on his gratitude, as if that annual gesture was an invisible pact that she never considered breaking. And he didn't even know her birthday. The years dragged by in a routine that needed no words. Clara no longer wore her hair tied up so tightly. Sometimes the strands fell loose, grey, over her wrinkled forehead. Her eyes no longer shone as they once did, but they held a tired, faithful, unbreakable light. Adam continued to live as if she were part of the furniture. He followed his routine with surgical precision. He woke up early, drank coffee while looking at his cell. Phone, left for work without asking if she needed anything. And when he came back, dinner was already ready, just like it always was. The silence between them was already a habit, like a tacit pact between someone he loved and someone he never learned to notice. Clara began to have difficulty with her hands. Rheumatism prevented her from holding things for long. Once he dropped a plate on the floor and knelt down in a hurry to clean it up, apologizing as if he had broken a promise. He just mumbled okay without looking back. She bent over more than she should have that day. And yet 2 days later there she was in the kitchen, making the same cake as always. The smell filled the house, spreading memories he couldn't identify, but that made him breathe deeper without understanding why. One night Adam came home late. Work was heavy, negotiations difficult. He walked in without saying goodnight, threw his briefcase on the couch, and went straight to his bedroom. He passed through the kitchen, and there she was, alone, wrapping a bandage around her aching wrists, sitting in front of the oven. The cake was still baking. She looked at him and smiled weakly, as if to say, "I'm still here." He just nodded and went upstairs. He never asked her why she kept doing this. Maybe deep down he didn't want to know. Once an ex-girlfriend came to the house to pick up a forgotten blouse. When she saw Clara, she grimaced and whispered in Adam's ear, "Does she still live here?" "Wow, she looks like a ghost." He smiled sideways, embarrassed, and Clara, who was pretending to clean the bookshelf, heard every word. She didn't complain. The next day, she served coffee as usual and left a bigger slice of the cake he liked on the plate, as if to say, "Even though she's a ghost, I still take care of her." It was this kind of pain that she swallowed, in silence, without drama, without demands. Clara didn't go out as much anymore. She avoided walking alone. She used a leg rest. But on his birthday every year the ritual was repeated. She woke up early, beat the eggs by hand, used the imported vanilla she bought in secret, and let the cake cool on the window grate, as she had done since he was 10 years old. It was her way of staying, of leaving a trail of the love she never dared to confess. That particular year, he forgot to eat. He received calls all day, went out to dinner with friends, and when he came back, he saw the cake still there, untouched. Clara had already gone to bed. She didn't leave a note, just the plate covered with an embroidered cloth. He opened it, smelled it, and left it on the counter. He went upstairs, took a shower, and went to bed. The next day, the cake was in the trash, thrown away by her without saying a word. That was the first deep cut, the kind of pain that doesn't bleed, but plants roots. He didn't know it yet, but he was already starting to lose her, not because of his failing hands, not because of his age, but because of the lack of reciprocity. Clara, who for so many years lived between care and shadow, was starting to fade from the inside out. And him? I still thought the cake would be there the following year. As always, like everything we think is eternal, until it isn't anymore. The following mornings passed like wind through closed curtains. Adam continued his life, but there was an annoyance he couldn't name. Clara no longer moved as nimbly. Her steps were slow, almost dragging. She left the pots, soaking, the clothes unfinished, and sometimes she forgot to boil the water on the stove. But she never forgot his birthday. No matter how much her bones ached, no matter how much her body said, "Stop," her heart insisted, "One more year. He still needs me." Time seemed cruel to her. Her apron no longer hid her pain as much. Her small eyes searched the ground, as if they had forgotten how to expect gratitude. Even so, on each birthday, she found the strength to repeat the gesture, as if that cake were an anchor, a reminder that despite everything she was still there, and she still loved him, even if in the way that only those who love in secret know how to do, without demanding anything in return. The day before her next birthday, Clara's body cried out for help. Alone in the kitchen, trying to reach the top shelf to get the vanilla extract, she lost her balance. She fell sideways, hitting her shoulder and head hard on the cold ceramic floor. The cake, still in the making, was half finished. The mixer was running, the oven was preheating, everything stopped, and no one noticed. No one, except the neighbor across the street, who found the lights on so long strange and came in through the unlocked door. She was the one who called the ambulance. She was the one who held Clara's hand while the paramedics arrived. And she was the one who filled out the hospital form with the name of the only emergency contact, Adam Whitmore. When the hospital called, he answered, irritably thinking it was some debt collection agency. The operator explained what had happened. He simply mumbled, "Okay, I'll look into it later," and hung up. Clara was hospitalized for 2 days. She suffered bruises, a slight trauma, and a silent arrhythmia that no one expected. When she was discharged, she returned home without fanfare. No balloons, no flowers, no hugs. Adam was at a conference when she arrived. When she entered, she found the kitchen as she had left it. Everything still, everything cold. She picked up the dough that was still in the bowl, threw it away and sighed slowly. She sat down in the chair in silence. And there, with her head down and her arm bandaged, she felt what it was like to grow old without being seen. Adam arrived that night. He didn't ask how she was. He just said that the house was darker than usual. She smiled, just to keep the peace. The next day, he found an envelope on the table with a receipt from the hospital and her signature at the bottom. He paid her but didn't ask for details. To him, everything still looked the same, only it wasn't. The following week, she made the cake again. With difficulty, yes, but she did. And that year, for the first time in 2 decades, Adam said, "It turned out well." That was all. But for Clara, it was as if she had heard, "I see you." She smiled differently that night. A small, tired smile, but genuine. Like someone who holds on to an old hope that has finally been kindled. Like someone who knows that the end is near, but that it was worth it. Because for her, as long as she could still make the cake, she still existed. The following year, the birthday approached like a thicker shadow. Clara stumbled over words and furniture. Her memory began to fail her on small details. She forgot where she'd put her glasses, left the gas on, left the sugar in her coffee. But when the calendar turned to that particular month, something was awakening inside her, as if her own body was bowing to an invisible call. Adam's birthday, the ritual of the cake, the last thing that still made sense. She began to prepare everything in advance. She wrote the shopping list in shaky handwriting, went out to the market alone, leaning on a cane she never used in front of him, and came back with the heavy bags dangling from her thin arms. She had cramps at night, her hips hurt, but she didn't complain. She went to the kitchen at dawn and separated the ingredients with the patience of someone sewing a eye. Farewell. She mixed the dough as if she were praying. The sound of the spoon against the bowl was almost a muffled lament. On the 11th, a day like so many others, she cleaned the entire house. She stopped every 2 rooms to sit down, feeling her body cry out for relief. Even so, she straightened the curtains, washed the pillowcases, and put flowers on the table. It was as if she had expected something different that year, as if finally something was going to change. Maybe, deep down, she wanted to be seen, even if just once. The next day, the alarm clock didn't go off. Adam woke up later than usual and didn't hear any noise coming from the kitchen. He found it strange for a moment, but thought she was sleeping a little longer. You took a shower, got ready, and went downstairs. In the hallway, you didn't smell anything. The air was neutral, cold. He opened the refrigerator. Nothing. The oven was off. The usual bowl, dry, the dishcloth, clean, hanging in the same place. The table was set, but no cake. He sat down, confused. For the first time in 30 years, there was nothing he had ever been grateful for. He called out to her, twice. No answer. He went upstairs to the back room. The bed was made, the window was open. And she wasn't there. No note, no trace, no sound. As if she had vanished, left the place that had never really been hers. At the end of the day, a message arrived from his neighbor. "I heard that Clara was unwell yesterday. She was taken to the hospital. She is stable. They said they called you." For a moment, he didn't know what to feel. He got up, grabbed his coat, and drove to the hospital. When he arrived, he learned that she had been transferred to a private room for observation. It wasn't serious, but she required complete rest. She wasn't expecting him. When she saw him, she smiled in surprise, a soft, almost sad smile. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. He just held out a small bag of fruit. She thanked him with her eyes. Then she said, "I'm sorry I didn't make the cake, honey. My arms wouldn't listen this time." He swallowed hard. He said everything was fine, but that was a lie. It wasn't. That night, he returned home and wandered through the rooms. Everything was in its place, except him, and except her. That absence now had a sound, a smell, and a taste. The taste of what is not perceived while it is there, the taste of what is not returned, and that, when it is missing, weighs heavily. and when it weighs heavily, it is too late. For the first time he felt hungry for the cake, but not because of gluttony, because of longing, because of a love he never knew how to name, and because of guilt that now knocked on his door without asking permission. The following days passed slowly, as if time were dragging itself along in the empty house. Clara was discharged, but she returned even more frail. She walked with short steps, barely lifting her feet. Her hands trembled as she held a cup. Her gaze lingered on simple things, as if she were trying to memorize what she would soon no longer see. Adam welcomed her home with a curt gesture of courtesy, unsure of where to put the words. He simply said, "If you need anything, let me know." She nodded, and the two remained in the same house but in different worlds. Inside, however, something in him had already changed. He began to notice the weight of silence, the space of absence, the way Clara avoided showing pain. He watched her struggle, but said nothing. Until one day he noticed that her hands had calluses in places where they shouldn't have been. Marks of someone who spent her life rubbing, sewing, kneading, holding other people's worlds without having anyone to hold her own. He felt a pang in his chest, but didn't know what to do with it. So he just watched, for the first time. Clara, on the other hand, seemed increasingly absent within her own body. She forgot the names of some things. She called the stove a cupboard. It took her a while to remember the way to the market, where she had been going for years. And even so, the day before her next birthday, she got everything ready. With effort, she went to the pantry, separated the flour, the eggs, and the vanilla essence that she had so carefully saved. The dough had not been kneaded that day, but the ingredients were all on the table, as if she were saying, "This time, it's up to you." He came down on the 11th and saw everything there. The packages, the sugar already measured, the recipe book open to a page marked with a piece of blue tape. Her shaky handwriting read, "Adam, you never asked me for this cake, but I always knew it was your only good childhood memory, and I wanted to be that memory." He read it as if he were reading a will. He stood still, not knowing whether to cry, run, or ask for forgiveness. She tried to make the cake. She picked up the eggs with shaking hands, spilled half the batter on the floor, didn't know how to bake it, got the temperature wrong. Everything went wrong. Everything. And then, with dirty fingers and a numb soul, she sank into the kitchen chair and sat there for hours. The smell that filled the house was different, faint, unclear. It wasn't the same. It never would be. Clara didn't come down that day. She slept more with medicines he bought himself, but he never asked how they worked. That night, he took a slice of the clumsy cake to her. He lightly knocked on the door and went in. She was asleep. The room smelled of lavender and pastries. He left the plate on the table next to him and left without saying anything, but when he closed the door, he heard her voice, weak, like a breath. "Thank you, my boy." In that sentence, everything he had ignored for decades was revealed. She still called him mine. She still thanked him. Even after years of indifference, of veiled contempt, of silence, even with her body tired, with her heart wounded, she was still capable of loving with gratitude, and he felt small, smaller than he had ever felt. For the first time, he understood what love without demands was, and he also understood that when that kind of love leaves, it takes a piece of the soul with it. The next morning, he walked down the stairs as if he were walking through a minefield. Each step seemed to hurt. The kitchen still smelled strangely of the cake he had tried to make. A smell that wasn't bad, but it was missing something essential, as if the main ingredient was her own touch. He found the plate in the sink. Clara had eaten a slice. She had left the fork next to it, clean, arranged on the napkin, with the hand-embroidered flowers. Next to it, a small note. "It was great. You've grown up." He felt a tightness in his chest, a heat in his eyes. He held the paper with firm fingers as if he wanted to reach into that letter and apologize for everything. But he still couldn't say anything. Not to her, not to himself. And perhaps that was the most painful thing. The knowledge that she forgave even what he didn't even know needed to be forgiven. In the days that followed, Clara hardly left her room. She slept a lot. She ate soup, She read the same old recipe books, even though she didn't have the strength to cook. Adam began to take on little tasks. He made tea, took it to her door, tidied the sheets, called the pharmacy. He didn't know exactly how to do it, but he did it. And when she asked in a low voice, "Are you okay?" he responded with a nod, but inside him a silent revolution was happening. One Saturday he saw her crying, alone, sitting in the armchair in her room, looking at an old photo of him from his high school graduation. She discreetly dried her tears with an old handkerchief that he vaguely remembered from his childhood. He stood at the door, watching in silence, not daring to interrupt. Only at that moment did he understand that she had always carried longing even though she lived with him. Longing for who he was. Longing for the boy she raised. Without his knowing. The following week, Clara fell in the bathroom. This time it was different, more serious. Adam heard the sound and ran. He saw her on the floor, scared, with her arm twisted. Her eyes sought his as if she finally needed help. And he, trembling, held her in his arms with a care he had never known how to have. He took her to the hospital, not like a boss taking an employee, but like a son carrying a part of himself. At the hospital, the tests came as a shock. Minor. Fractures, but also signs of progressive kidney failure. The doctor was direct. She needs complete rest and emotional attention. She's tired. Very tired. Adam didn't know what to do, or what to say. He only knew that something inside him had woken up, and that something didn't want to sleep anymore. He carried Clara back home in silence. He helped her to bed. He sat beside her. And after so many years, he held her hand tightly and said in a choked voice, "You were my family, and I never told you that." She squeezed back without saying anything, because she knew, and maybe she had always known. Adam began to live with the feeling that every gesture she made could be his last. He watched her eyes slowly fade, like the lights of a city seen from afar at dusk. Clara, even bedridden, tried to smile. She apologized for needing help, for waking him up at night, for leaving the food half-eaten, and he, now more silent than ever, felt a guilt that could not be expressed even in words. One day she found a notebook with a faded cover in her dresser drawer. It had been in there for years. It was a diary. Not the kind of diary with secrets, but with little notes, simple things. Adam smiled today. He didn't like dinner. I need to make it better. He came home tired today, but he left his coat on the chair like he did when he was a boy. Each page was proof that she had observed everything, and loved everything, even his absences, even the days when he seemed not to see her. On one of the last pages, there was a sealed envelope with his name on it. "For when I'm no longer here." He didn't have the courage to open it. He put the envelope in the briefcase he carried to work every day, as if its weight kept him anchored to the ground. He started coming home early, making soup even if it was tasteless, getting the clean, warm sheets, adjusting the pillow under her head with hands that learned to be careful too late. One morning, Clara called him. Her voice was thin, as if it were breaking through a sea of fatigue. "Will you help me get up?" He ran over and gently picked her up in his arms. When she sat down, he pointed to the desk. There's a notebook, with recipes. I want you to have it." He tried to refuse, saying he didn't know what to do, but she smiled weakly and replied, "You will know. One day." That night, Adam opened the notebook. Each recipe was accompanied by a little note. He hated this one, but he pretended not to. This one was his. Mother's favorite. This one was the first one I made for his birthday. At the back of the notebook was a photo, him at 10 years old, holding the cake with Clara in the background, out of focus, smiling. It was the only photo of the two of them together, and he had never seen it. In the following days he began to read that notebook as if it were a farewell letter written in flower and affection. He ran his fingers over her handwriting as if trying to feel the skin of someone who was already leaving, and little by little he began to understand that the cake was not just a dessert. It was presence. It was resistance. It was Clara's way of saying, "Even if you don't see it, I'm here." One rainy Sunday she asked to see the kitchen. She said she wanted to sit there just to hear the sound of the house. Adam wheeled her in slowly, carefully. He placed her near the window. She closed her eyes for a few minutes and whispered, "Here is where I was happy." He held her hand and said, "Nothing." But inside she was screaming, and what she was screaming was, "Sorry for not understanding before." In the days that followed, Clara didn't talk as much anymore. She slept for long hours, opening her eyes only for brief moments, and even then, she seemed to get lost between past and present. Adam sat by her bedside watching. He brought her books that she liked, played soft music that she listened to while washing the dishes, and tried, in some way, to give back a little of what she had given. But he always felt that it was too little, too late. One night he decided to open an old wooden box that was kept in her room. Inside were newspaper clippings, old photographs, and letters. One of them, signed by his mother, thanked Clara for being the bridge between the broken pieces of the house. Another, from an old neighbor, said that Adam was lucky to have a woman like you around. He read it all in silence, his eyes moist, his hands shaking. Clara was more than a silent presence. She had been a wall, a support, a root, and he never recognized her. Among the papers he found a birthday card he had made when he was 7, crooked, colored letters written in crayon. For Clara, "I like you very much." She had kept it for decades, like a treasure, like the only time he had ever said, even if it was a mistake, that he saw her. It broke him. He sat on the floor with the box in his lap and cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child, not for the card, but for what it symbolized, everything she had carried alone, everything he refused to see. The next morning, Clara didn't wake up. She was breathing, but she seemed distant. Adam took her to the hospital again. The hospitalization was more delicate. The doctors said that her body was slowly giving up. She resisted for years longer than expected, for someone for sure. He didn't answer, but he knew. He knew that she stayed for him, that she waited for something from him for too long, and that now it was no longer time. He spent hours in her hospital room. He read to her. He brought her flowers. He touched her wrinkled hand and wrote her letters that he left beside her pillow, even if she didn't read them. In one of them, he wrote, "I only discovered what love was when you stopped getting up early," and he left it there, folded, in the trembling handwriting of someone who feels and no longer needs to hide it. The nurses were moved to see him. They said they had rarely seen a man so quiet, so constant. He only smiled vaguely. He didn't know how to explain that this constancy was made of delay, of a love that took too long to awaken, and that now he was only trying, with small gestures, to repair the irreparable. One afternoon, as the rain fell lightly on the window, Clara opened her eyes for a few seconds. She met his, and with her voice almost swallowed by time, she said, "You were my home." He replied with silent tears, "And you were my most beautiful silence." She smiled. She closed her eyes and never opened them again. The house seemed different when he returned with the envelope in his hand and an empty heart. There were no more footsteps on the stairs, nor the sound of the kettle whistling at dawn. The silence was different now, no longer the silence of routine, but that of absence, a kind of silence that breathes within the walls and tightens the chest without making a sound. Clara was gone, without ceremony, without expensive flowers, without fanfare. A hospital. Room, a light breath, a last smile. That was it. Adam didn't want to wake. He said she wouldn't have liked strangers pretending to be affectionate. He took her ashes home, kept them in a small blue vase, and placed them in the center of the kitchen, where she used to leave the cake pan cooling. He didn't know why, he just knew it had to be there, the place where she existed most strongly. The first week was a series of trials and tribulations. He tried to make coffee the way she did. He couldn't. He tried to iron his shirts the way she did. He failed every time. He tried to clean the floor with the same lavender scent, her scent, but he spilled too much. The whole house seemed to want to remind him that he had never learned to live with her. He had just let her live for him, and now he had to deal with the emptiness. One Sunday she found the white dish with faded flowers in the back of the pantry. The same one she always put the cake on. It was clean, covered with plastic, and inside was something unexpected, a note tied with tape. The handwriting was hers, small, firm, already familiar. "If you ever miss me, try this recipe. I'll be there, a little bit in every spoonful." Beside it, a folded sheet of paper with the handwritten recipe, with sweet notes in the margins. "Be careful with the salt, you always confuse it. Use real vanilla extract, not the cheap kind. Mix clockwise like thyme." He took a deep breath and began. For the first time, alone, afraid of making a mistake. He mixed the ingredients, followed each line as if Clara were right next to him. When he put the cake in the oven, he stood there, watching the time pass. The smell began to invade the house. A warm, sweet, old smell. And for the first time since she left, he cried with his face turned upward. It was as if Clara were there, in the form of memory, of vapor, of forgiveness. When the cake was ready, he cut a slice, placed it on the plate with flowers, and sat down at the table, alone. Before eating, he held his fork in the air as if he wanted to say something, and he said, "You taught me everything, even when I didn't deserve it. I just didn't understand the lesson in time." Then he ate, and each piece was a mixture of longing, regret, and belated love, as if finally he was tasting what he had always had before him, but only now had he learned to feel. Over time, Adam began to repeat the cake ritual every year, not for the taste, not for tradition, but out of necessity, as if, in that warm scent of vanilla and lemon zest, he found a piece of her soul again. In the early years, he made it only for himself, in silence, without guests, without candles. He would cut a slice, leave one in front of the blue vase with the ashes, and eat another on her chair, as if sharing a secret that only the two of them knew. But the pain didn't stay still. It transformed. It became care. It became a living memory. Adam began to see the world as Clara did, with tenderness in the details. He greeted the delivery men with a smile he didn't know how to give before. He wiped the corners of the house with a towel like she did. He even began to learn how to sew, guided by old videos and the memory of the sound of the needle in her hand. One cold November morning, he decided to do something he had never done before. He sat on the living room floor, spread out the notes that Clara had left hidden around the house, and began to paste them onto a wooden bulletin board he had installed on the kitchen wall, one by one, in no order. Some were already faded, others still smelled of lavender. In the center, he placed the card from his childhood, the one that said, "I love you so much, Clara." That was where he always returned. To the boy she had not let get lost, to the woman who had loved him in silence. That same month he decided to visit the old school in the neighborhood. Clara liked to stop by there, even when she was old, just to listen to recess. She would sneak little cakes for the children. He remembered this and on impulse baked 7 cakes just like the one she made. He took them in separate jars, along with handwritten notes with phrases from her: "Eat warm," "Smile more," "Someone is taking care of you, even if you can't see it." The teachers were moved. The children smiled. And for the first time he felt that he was giving back to the world the love he had received in silence. The weeks went by. Adam started going to the market, saying hello to the baker, sitting on the porch in the late afternoon just to feel the wind. Like she used to do, he began to understand that Clara never had luxury, nor time off, nor great achievements, but she had a complete love for a house that wasn't hers, for a boy who grew up without understanding, and for a life that she didn't demand recognition to live. She was complete, even without being noticed. One afternoon, while reorganizing the kitchen, he found another note lying behind the microwave. "If you ever laugh when you remember me, then it was worth it." He laughed, alone, with tears in his eyes, and he replied in a low voice, "It was worth it. Everything." Because there, between the longing and regret, was also gratitude, the transformation. Karma was fulfilled not as a punishment, but as a lesson. He learned, late, But he learned. Time, which had once seemed indifferent, was now lived with intention. Adam no longer rushed about as much. He no longer shouted on the phone or left dishes piled up. He had learned the importance of detail. He had come to understand the value of a chair pulled out with care, of a loaf of bread torn in half with clean hands, of a towel folded with precision. Things that I had previously seen as invisible, now sacred, things that belonged to her. One night he dreamed of Clara. She was wearing an apron, smiling, stirring the cake batter while calling him Little Adam in that calm voice he had always ignored. In the dream, she looked over her shoulder and said, "You've gotten beautiful as you've gotten older." He woke up with a light heart and an urge to cry that didn't come from pain. It came from something deeper, from the knowledge that she still cared for him somehow, even from afar. One pale afternoon, he decided to go to the square where Clara used to sit. He sat on the same bench with a notebook on his lap. He began to write. He didn't know to whom or why. He just wrote things about her, phrases she said, foods she made, small gestures. Before he knew it, he had written 12 pages. He closed the notebook reverently and decided that it needed to live beyond him. He went home and over the next few weeks typed it all up, edited it, revised it. He turned it into a simple booklet with a white cover and small print. Clara, the silence that loved me. He had 50 copies printed. He gave them to his neighbors, to the local library, to the public schools. In each book was a bookmark with the note he had found behind. The microwave. "If you ever laugh when you remember me, then it was worth it." The reaction was immediate. People who had never heard of her were moved. A woman called to thank her. "Your story made me call my grandmother today." A man left a note in the mailbox. "I never knew the name of the lady who raised me. Today I cried for her." And Adam began to understand. Clara was now many anonymous, forgotten, invisible Claras, and, in a way, alive in each memory awakened. A month later, on his birthday, he woke up before the sun. He washed his face, put on a simple shirt, went to the kitchen and calmly prepared the cake. He put it in the oven to bake, sat at the table, and waited. When the smell spread through the house, he closed his eyes. He didn't say anything, he didn't need to, it was all there. When she finished, she cut 2 slices. She placed one on the table next to the blue vase. She placed the other on a plate with an embroidered napkin. She went out into the street. She walked to the square. She sat on the bench where she liked and left the plate there. A note attached with a ribbon said, "If you also had someone who loved you in silence, this piece is yours." He got up and left without looking back. He didn't need to see who he would catch, because in that gesture he no longer asked for forgiveness. He reciprocated, and deep down, that was what Clara had always wanted. On that birthday, something different hung in the air. It wasn't just the smell of the cake, nor the lighter silence in the house. It was the presence of something that couldn't be explained, as if Clara, even absent, was in every detail, in the way he folded the napkin, in the exact way he poured the frosting over the cake, in the choice of soft music that played softly on the old radio. It was as if, somehow invisible, she was there, as she always was. Adam placed the platter on the table, lit a small candle in the center of the cake, and stood in front of it, as if waiting for something to happen. For a second he felt like talking to her, out loud, but he didn't. He just closed his eyes and let time pass over his face, like a warm breath coming from a place he couldn't see. The phone rang, but he didn't answer it. He didn't want any distractions. That moment was just his and hers. That same afternoon, he was walking back from the market when he saw a girl sitting on the steps of a church, crying alone. She was wearing a dirty school uniform, her hair tied up in a mess. And she had a look in her eyes that he recognized immediately, the look of someone who doesn't feel seen. He stopped in front of her, bent down, and asked if she was okay. She responded with a shrug and a sniff. She said she had been left there by her aunt, who never came back on time. Adam looked around. No one. He sat down next to her. He took a small slice of the cake he was taking to a neighbor's house from his bag. He handed it to her without saying anything. The girl looked at it suspiciously. Then she took a bite, and when she swallowed, she said, "It tastes like a hug." He smiled. He almost laughed. And at that moment, a warm and unexpected memory passed through him. Because that was what Clara said when she tasted her own cake. The girl asked his name. He said it. She told him hers. Sophie. They stayed there for a few more minutes. They talked about simple things, school, fruits, old drawings, until her aunt appeared with a hurried look and pulled her by the arm. Before leaving, Sophie looked back and said, "Sir, you cook like a grandma." He replied with a trembling smile, "A grandma taught me." That night, he put the recipe on the kitchen bulletin board. No longer folded, no longer hidden among papers. It was there, glued together with tape and care. Next to it, a new portrait. A montage made by a friend, him and Clara, side by side, in sepia tones, as if time had decided to bring them together now. At the bottom of the image, a sentence. "The love that is not said out loud screams in absence." Months later, he began teaching cooking at a community center. Just simple cakes. He said he was not a chef nor an expert. He just wanted to pass on something he had learned too late. People came little by little, and at the end of each class he let each person take a slice, but not before writing on the wrapping paper, "Someone cares about you." One morning, he found an envelope among the books on the shelf. He didn't remember putting it there. He opened it carefully. It was Clara's letter, the one with his name written on the cover. "For when I'm no longer here." He took a deep breath and began to read. "Adam, my boy, if you are reading this, it is because you have finally learned to look with your heart. I was not here to teach you everything, but I tried to leave my love spread in the details, in the aroma of the house, on the edge of the plate, on the folded blanket in the living room. You grew up. I saw you, even when you did not see me. And if today you miss me, then I existed." He closed the letter with silent tears. He got up. He went to the kitchen. He turned on the oven. He made another cake. And for the first time in his life, as the dough rose, he felt that he was no longer trying to fill a void. He was trying to continue a story. Karma had been fulfilled, not as punishment, but as a lesson. The silent, ignored, forgotten love had taught us more than any scream, because sometimes the greatest turnaround is discovering that what we despised most was exactly what sustained us the most. If this story touched your heart in any way, leave a like. It's just a click for you. But for us, it means that Clara has not been forgotten. Write in the comments, "I was also loved in silence." Let's keep alive the memory of those who took care of us, even when we couldn't see them. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Here, every story has a heart beating behind it. And now, watch the video that is appearing here on the screen. He also talks about the love that no one sees until it's too late.